G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this is a video on how to use Copic markers. The first thing I'll say is I think I pronounced it wrong and always have, and I'm not going to change it. I hear people call them Copic markers, but I'm sorry. I'm always going to call them Copic markers and I'm always going to call manga. So deal with it. So the illustration you're looking at, we're going to color in later with Copic markers, and I'm going to explain a whole bunch of tools and techniques. It was created by Christopher Hart, who is an author who has his own YouTube channel. You can go check it out now. He has really fun how to draw cartoons and cute characters as well. But before we get to coloring in this character, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of different things about Copic markers, how to use them, how I use them, and go over a lot of the basics so that people who aren't familiar with them and want to get started with them know how to approach it. Now, when we talk about Copic markers, there are three kinds of markers. There's the classic, which has a chisel tip and then sort of a rounded tip, but isn't a brush tip. There's the Copic sketch, which is the variety I use. These have a chisel tip as well, as you can see, but they also, on the other side, since Copic markers are double-sided, have a brush tip, and this is extremely useful for comic art and cartoons, which is what I do, so I prefer these. And then there's a marker called the Copic Chow. These are a little bit more of a budget marker, so they're a little cheaper. They use the same ink and they have these same two brush nibs. So it has a chisel tip and a brush tip, but the reason that they're cheaper is because they're slightly smaller, they have less ink inside, and they're round, and the ends of them don't actually have the color identity on them, which is very useful if you build up a larger collection of Copic markers. So before I dive into the depths of Copic markers and the huge amount of colors and varieties available and how to navigate that if you're starting off and want to get a set for yourself, the first thing I'm going to talk about is paper, not markers. Now, the reason I'm going to start off talking about paper is because Copic markers are an alcohol-based marker, and they do this really nifty trick. They blend into each other. So when you use Copic markers, you set down a base tone color, and then you can set down a shadow color, and then you can go back to your base tone and mix it in, and you get the alcohol of the markers to blend together, and you can create some really nice gradiented effect. And you don't even get the full effect of how nice the outcome of these markers looks in this video, because in person they look just fantastic in a way that doesn't really show up in my video equipment. So what I have here is ordinary printer paper, and I'm going to show you why you need to consider paper before you use your markers. I'm just going to set down a mid-tone base tone of like a medium light purple. Then I'm going to lay down a darker shade of purple. And if I go back to my original base tone and try and mix them, we do sort of get this blending happening very slightly, but it also wrecks the paper a bit because this is quite thin. This is just ordinary printer paper. So we can start to get the blending effect, but the durability of the paper is pushed to its limits. And if I open it up, you can see that we get this unsightly bleeding happening. And the blended outcome does sort of work, but not in a way that really uses these markers to their full potential. And even in your sketchbooks, this is something to be careful of. This is one of my favorite brands of sketchbooks. It's got quite a thick, nice GSM paper and a smooth finish. But if I use my markers just on a regular sketchbook, the same sort of thing happens that happens with printer paper. You don't get a great blending effect. The colors do show a lot better on thicker and smoother paper, but the blending isn't as smooth and nice, and of course, you ruin your sketchbooks. So that's just something to keep in mind. What I recommend using, and what I personally use myself, is something called Blending Card. The brand I use is called Expressit Blending Card, and it's really thick, high GSM, very high quality paper. And the best part about it is the colors and the finish of the markers used on this paper. It's extraordinary. It's nothing you've ever seen. So as you can see, when I lay down my base tone, the color laid down looks actually quite flat and nice. And then when I lay down my heavy shadow tone next to it, it dries pretty quick, it absorbs into the paper, but not in a way that is unseemly. And then if I go back to my base tone and do my blending, you can blend and blend and blend as much as you want until you get the ideal gradient effect that you want. And you can see that even as it dries very quickly, we've got a gradient effect from a fairly light base tone to a fairly dark shadow tone. So once again, I use Expressit Blending Card. The link to it is in the description if you want to check it out. I feel like I should let you guys know as well that this is not a paid video by any means. I haven't been collaborating with Copic to create this video. I'm creating this as a tutorial for my viewers because I use Copic markers and I love Copic markers, and I'm not getting paid to do this. I just wanted to show you how I use them and that I like them. So that's the first thing to know, use the right paper, and then of course the next thing to know is that you can create that blending effect, which now brings me to the markers themselves and the colors. One of the most common questions I get when people are asking about Copic markers is, what do I get? There are hundreds of colors. And usually when you get a set of pencils or a set of textures or colors or markers or whatever, you get a set of 12, set of 28, set of whatever, and it comes with all the basics. Whereas if you're investigating Copic markers, you'll find that there are lots of different color sets, color packs, and it can be really confusing. Now the reason this is a problem is because Copic markers are expensive. A single Copic marker will cost around $10. No kidding. That's a lot of money, and artists don't often have a lot of money. So if you're looking to get some Copic markers and you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll start off with maybe 10, that's a small amount. $100, ooh, okay, slow down. So it's gonna hurt your wallet a bit, but I will say that there is no finished result in a traditional paper medium that I prefer more than Copic markers. There is nothing I've found that beats the professional look that it results in. There are a few added benefits to Copic markers, the fact that they're refillable, so you can always keep the same marker that you bought the first time years and years and years ago, and they actually do last quite a while. They're extremely versatile. So I'm gonna go into that in a moment and show you how to get the biggest bang for your buck out of those markers. The other thing to keep in mind is the Copic Chow marker, though they have slightly less ink and don't have the numbers on the top, are a great place to start because they are more affordable. They are set at a lower price range. Now, like I was saying, the question I get asked most often is, what colors do I get out of all those colors? I have a set that looks like this. This is a set of 72 Copic markers. Now, the set of 72 markers will run you between $600 to $800 depending on where you get them. And while they do offer a large variety of colors and a good mix of colors, they are of course very expensive. You can get smaller sets, you can get a set of 32 or a set of 12, and there are lots of different default sets in these sets, but I actually wouldn't recommend any one of them to a starter, to a beginner. I would instead recommend buying individual markers. You can get a set of 12 and specify the specific colors you want. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I'm going to present to you JAZZA'S recommended set of 12 Copic markers, and I'm going to show you them and demonstrate why I recommend this set of 12 markers and how you can apply them and why they are useful and versatile. The first 4 colors I recommend: primary colors: red, yellow, green, and blue. Now, the problem with recommending Copic marker colors, as anyone who uses them knows, you can't just say red, yellow, green, and blue, because there are about 50 reds, 50 yellows, 50 greens, and 50 blues. Actually, there's probably more of each of them. So I will specify my recommendation involves the R29 Lipstick Red, the G05 Emerald Green, B24 Sky, and C17 Golden Yellow. These are the ones I recommend from my set of 72 Copic markers. Primary colors are important because first and foremost, you have other colors from primary colors. So say, for example, I want a purple. Because the alcohol in these markers mix, I can put down my blue, put down my red, and then I can go back to my blue and saturate as much as I want until I get the tone of purple that I would like. Now, of course, you are slightly limited in terms of getting lighter purples or darker purples. You're kind of stuck in a bit of a mid-tone. But again, I'm going through some basic recommendations here, so this is a good place to start. For example, if you want to get a bit of a rich orange, you could put down your red first and then mix in and mix in and mix in your yellow until it turns into the orange that you want. Another question I get a lot about these markers is, if you go over a dark color with a light color, won't it ruin the marker? Okay, so let's test it. We've got this dark area here. I'm gonna go over it with my yellow. I'll test it here with a strong red as well. I'll use my yellow, and you can see that it does sort of drag with the yellow after. But this doesn't ruin the nib, because what you actually can do is just use the marker on a spare bit of paper and it will just wash off that alcohol from the other marker by replacing it with the alcohol inside the marker itself. So you can use a very, very, very light marker on a very, very, very dark, already colored area of Copic marker on paper, and then just kind of wipe it on another piece of paper or scribble it on another spare sheet of paper, and it will come off and completely clean itself. So no, you cannot ruin your markers by mixing them together. So they are my first recommendation for primary colors. The next recommendation is skin tones. Now, it depends depends what you're going to use your markers for, but I use my markers a lot for comic book characters and cartoons. So skin tones are one of the most recurring things, and I have these 4 colors in almost all of the skin tones I ever used. These colors going from light to dark consist of E21 Baby Skin Pink, E11 Barley Beige, E13 Light Suntan, and E57 Light Walnut. So I'm just going to lay these down one by one and show you why I like them. As you can see, the colors complement each other fairly well. When I lay one after the other, they flow into each other nicely and we get a nice array of light to dark. The other thing too is if you go in reverse order, so with each previous tone, you can mix it with the latter tone, these colors blend with each other extremely well. So you can get really nice gradiented skin tone looks. And there you go. That is the result of these skin colors put down one after the other and blended into each other. You get this really nice spectrum of colors and a gradient. And you can go from anywhere using these 2 colors for a very, very light Caucasian to just the darker colors and some grays to get some darker skin color looks as well. Which brings me to my next point. The remaining 4 colors are not colors. They are colors as a dog would see them. They are grays. Now the funny thing about Copic markers is there is a huge variety of grays as well. There are different tones of grays. There are grays of different saturations. There are blue grays and purple grays and red grays and grey grays and black grays and neutral grays and cold grays. So to keep things really simple, I'm dividing this into 2. We have 2 neutral grays and 2 cool grays. The 2 neutral grays I have are N3 and N5. They are neutral grays because their color is of a more neutral tone. I'm sure you can get warm ones too, but these work quite well with warm colors. The cool grays I'm using are C6 and C8, and they are so-called cool grays because the tone in which they are gray feels a little colder in their color than the neutral grays. You can see with the 2 colors put down next to each other that the neutral grays have a more warm tone, the cool grays have a more cool tone, and the reason it's good to have these separate from each other and usable is that if I put down a blue and I want to add some shadow, because in JAZZA'S sample set I don't have darker blues, what I actually can do is use C6 and lay down a cool gray shadow tone, and that complements the blue quite well and actually blends with the blue, and because it's a cooler, colder color, it ends up looking like a nice shadow tone. Now it does desaturate the blue, but a useful trick is you can go back to your base tone and put in some more of your base tone, and you end up with a really nice shadow tone that looks like a dark blue. And of course you can blend it with your original blue color and you get a really nice gradiented effect. So with only one blue color, we have this nice spectrum of blue simply by using the gray. And that was the lighter of our 2 grays. So we can go all the way to quite a dark blue by putting down the C8 and then again blending that with our original blue. We can do the same with our neutral grays, but with something like, say, a red. Now I'll show you over here in a separate place. If I mix a cool gray with my red, it sort of clashes. It just doesn't work that well. But if I use my neutral gray on my red, I'm going to use an N3 here, you can see already that it actually mixes quite nicely. And then I can go from my N3 to my N7. And we've added our basic shadow tones there, but because it's desaturated it, I can now go back to my base tone, blend it in and add further saturation, and we get the same gradiented effect. And with the simple mix of the primary colors and some grays, we all of a sudden have opened up a huge spectrum of colors that we can use from that primary color base tone. Let's say I want to use brown and it's not dark enough. Quite often I'll use brown and I want a dark brown. Even in my set of 72 markers, E57 Light Walnut is the darkest brown I have, and that is not a very dark brown. But that's okay, because using the same trick, I just throw in my neutral gray, add a little more saturation, and all of a sudden I have a brown that is much darker than my original light walnut brown, as you can see. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the finished recommended set that I would propose. If you were to get 12 Copic markers, this could really do you a lot of nifty tricks. You have skin tone colors that are going to cover nearly all of your needs. You have primary colors that are going to be able to mix and do a lot for you as well. And you have your neutral grays, which are going to really help you get the most out of your skin tones and your primary colors. Now you may wonder if it's worth getting a black marker. I wouldn't worry about it. I would usually use a Sharpie or fine liners, colors to get the black that I need. And as for laying down lighter colors or expanding your collection of colors, the way you go about that is going to become apparent the more you use your markers. You'll see what you use the most and you'll see what you have need for the most, so that when eventually you want to expand, you'll know exactly how to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Enough talking. Let's put some of this into practice. So using a set of 12 basic Copic markers that I would recommend, I'm going to color in this dude here. Once again, provided by Christopher Hart. Make sure to check his channel, link is in the description. I nearly always start off with skin tones. So the first thing I'm going to do is lay down my base lightest skin tone. Then color by color, I can add my darker areas of shadow with my next set of skin tones. And you can blend as you go, but what you can also do is just lay down the layers of tones and then go back to your very original skin tone or your base tone and blend them all together at once. To do his jeans, I'm laying down my blue as a base tone, and then I'm adding my C6 and C8 cool grey in layers, and then going back to my original blue tone and adding saturation and blending as I go. I'm doing the boy's jumper in my emerald green and doing the same thing to get those shadow tones that I did with the blue tones, but this time I'm using my neutral greys, my N3 and N5, then going back of course to my neutral green to blend. I want a purple scarf, so I'm going to lay down a base tone of red and then add my blue to change the saturation as the alcohol mixes to the mix between them, which is purple. I want him to have a dark brown hair color, so to start off with I'm going to put down my darkest brown I have in my small set, which is the E57 Light Walnut, and then I'm going to add further shadows with my N5 neutral grey. And then of course I go back to my light walnut brown to add saturation and to accentuate the shadows. Then of course I can add some colour to his eyes and just use a Sharpie to add some pupils. Then to add some interest and contrast to the piece, I'm going to use my red on the left and rearmost areas of the character just as a sort of edge highlight slash shadow. And there you go, ladies and gentlemen, this is the result. And as you can see, with simply 12 colors, 4 of them being primary colors, 4 of them being skin tones, and 4 of them being a variety of grays, we can still get some interesting gradients, get images that pop out stylistically and have some great visual impact. Of course, a set of 12 Copic markers is still going to be fairly expensive for someone starting off, but I will say that I believe that is a wise investment. So if it's something that you ever want to save up for or encourage people to help pitch in for a birthday present or Christmas present because you want to get into them, I definitely feel like you're going to be satisfied with the outcomes you can get using the Copic markers. I hope this video tutorial and guide and recommendation of Copic markers has been helpful to you and interesting. All the details for the colors I've used and the paper I use can be found in the description. And of course, thank you, Christopher Hart, for creating this image for me to demonstrate the use of Copic markers to my viewers with. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, I'll see you later.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel to see new content every week. Check out more of my stuff by clicking the annotations over there. If you want to support my work and get a few goodies for yourself, head over to my store for archives, ebooks, and get yourself something nice. If you're looking for a great place to collaborate, explore, or share your own content, head over to newgrounds.com. That's it for now, and until next time, see you later.